So it's very unusual that you didn't go to TAC. Instead, you're assigned to be the commander of Strategic Air Command and the Joint Strategic Target Planning Staff. Could you explain how that happened?
Well, not as unusual as it sounds. I think I was the third fighter pilot to take command of SAC. J.C. Meyer preceded me, and there was one other. But it was really a matter of who the SecDef trusted. The plan was that Jerry O'Malley, who was commander of TAC, the plan was he was to go to SAC, and I was going to take TAC. Jerry O'Malley and his wife were killed in an aircraft accident. And that left us with the dilemma of how do we replace Benny Davis, who was the commander of SAC. I was the vice chief at the time, so I was actively involved in finding the solution. We offered Secretary Weinberger 3 names. He turned down all 3 because he simply was not willing to promote a 3-star into a 4-star commander of SAC. And he wanted to be very certain that the commander of SAC was someone he knew and someone who was a sitting 4-star. So after we'd struggled with that for about a month, I get a phone call from Charlie Gabriel, and he said, "Larry, I got good news. We have the solution for SAC." And I said, "Great." And he said, "Well, come on over." And I came on over, and he said, "Congratulations, you're the solution." So that was sort of the last thing I expected. But I still expected I would go take command of TAC. Let me tell you at this point, of all of my 37 years in the Air Force, the period of time that I will remember as the greatest period of time was command of SAC. So here I am, fighter pilot, flown 85 different kinds of airplanes, but what I really not enjoyed the most, but got the most professional satisfaction from was SAC. So that's how I got there.
And you were there for about a year.
Now, I should also relate that when I was a vice chief, General Curtis LeMay was on the board of Air Force Aid Society, so he came back to Washington once a quarter for a board meeting. And he always asked for a 30-minute appointment with the vice chief, not the chief. And he would come in at exactly 12 o'clock. He would give me 30 minutes worth of advice, about 75% of which was executable, which is a very high score for a retired 4-star. But when it was announced I was going to become the commander of SAC, he asked for an hour. And he came into my office and he said, "Larry," first time he ever called me Larry. Up until then it was always Welch. He said, "Larry, let me tell you, when Tommy White sent me to take command of SAC, he said, LeMay, that command is a disgrace." He said, "They can't get their airplanes in the air. When they do, they can't find the target. When they find the target, they can't hit it." And he said, "I'll give you 1 year to fix that command, and if you can't do it, I'll send somebody who can." I said, "Now, Larry, since then, everyone that takes command of SAC thinks they've just had that instruction from Tommy White's ghost." He said, "That's wrong." He said, "It's a great command, full of great people, highly competent." He said, "You can change the atmosphere at SAC. You saw what was done in TAC, and you can do that in SAC, and I expect you to do that." This is Curtis LeMay. And I said, "Yes, sir." Anyway, what I didn't tell him was, well, that's good news, General LeMay, because that's exactly what the chief told me to do. So I went to SAC with that marching order, and I went to SAC with with a set of expectations that were totally false.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a hard job to change the atmosphere in SAC.
We'll come back and talk more about SAC and JSTPS later. At this point, you become Chief of Staff of the Air Force in 1986. This is a very active period in American engagement with the Soviet Union. You serve as Chief of Staff until 1990. We'll talk a lot about things that went on during that time later in the discussion. In 1990, you retire. You've been approached by IDA to see if you'd be interested in becoming the president. You do become the president of IDA, the Institute for Defense Analyses, in 1991, and are still with IDA today. You served as the president for many years, then you became a senior fellow in 2003. You resumed your position as president in 2006, and then resumed your position as a senior fellow when Dr. Chu became the president of IDA in 2009. While you were at IDA, you did many other things, serving on virtually every commission or Defense Science Board study, every special committee that looked at things nuclear. And we'll talk about that later on, too. Why don't we talk about your experiences at SAC? I mean, a lot of people know what Strategic Air Command is. Maybe not so many know what the Joint Strategic Target Planning Staff is, which was your second hat.
Yeah. Now, the Joint Strategic Planning Staff's an interesting construct because the Air Force in particular had been trying to make SAC a truly joint command for a very long time. Our strategic partners were unwilling to do that, and so the compromise was the Joint Strategic Target Planning Staff, which was the director was the commander of SAC, but the vice director was a three-star admiral. And so that's how the JSTPS plays in the overall construct. I knew a lot about SAC when I went there. I knew nothing about the JSTPS. So I undertook to educate myself about it. And one of the things that quickly became apparent to me is that we were reacting to guidance ostensibly from the President, certainly from the Secretary of Defense, but I doubt that either the President or the Secretary of Defense had any understanding of the impact of the guidance. But the guidance was that we were to target weapons to achieve a certain level of damage expectancy against classes of targets. At that time, we were targeting over 10,000 nuclear weapons and unable to meet the damage expectancy requirements, which were causing people to argue we needed more weapons. Well, when I looked at targeting and the laydown of nuclear weapons, to me that was just insanity. And the good news was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs agreed with me. So one of the rules was to achieve a certain level of damage expectancy against a certain class of targets. We were putting 4 and 5 weapons on a single target. So I simply decreed you will not put more than 3 weapons on any target without my personal approval. Well, obviously I didn't have the authority to do that, but nonetheless that became our direction. Anyway, the point is, it was from really examining in detail what we were doing in terms of targeting and understanding in detail the impact of the guidance, which I was convinced was not the intent of the President or the SecDef. That meant that when I actually joined, when I became the Air Force Chief of Staff, then I was in position to advocate for something that not only that I found more sensible, but that the new Secretary of Defense and the President resonated with very strongly. But it was that experience that gave me the understanding and the credibility to later have some significant impact in changing that.